You're recording.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending upon where you are. Welcome to the final edition of Library Lunch and Learn for 2023, which I cannot believe we're saying, because that means that it's just about to get cold here in the Northeast and not my favorite time of year at all. Um, but this is a fun episode today. It's the music edition, and it's going to be very fun. We are going to hear from librarians from the Old Town School of Folk Music and Library and Archives. It's going to be very fun. And we also have an editor from Rizzoli talking about a book about LL Cool J. It's going to be very fun. So I just want to say the importance of library lunch and learn is to talk to librarians about their wonderful collections and learn more about what so many of you do on a daily basis. We love when there's such a curated um, area of expertise, and we love to celebrate that. And we love to find the right books to go with the right library. And I think we really did today. It's important to note in a world as crazy as this one that it's fun when you find something that most people agree on or most people can relate to and celebrate. And I think music is definitely one of those topics that we can all get on board with. And I think music makes everybody happy. Music pulls us all through life in the same way. So we love when it's something like this. I just want to point out quickly that no good deed goes unpunished. Laura was at ALA Annual in Chicago, very innocently walked into our booth and we started talking to her about what she does. And my colleague Hugo was like fascinated. So it's definitely his fault that we have you here today, Laura, but it was so nice meeting you at ALA. But it was, you just very innocently came into our booth to ask us a question, and now look at all the work we put you through. So, but it was lovely to meet you in Chicago. So I'm going to have my colleague Miriam introduce herself and introduce our librarian portion of the program today. And we hope you'll really all enjoy yourself. Remember, you'll get a recording of this when it's over. And if you have any questions for the librarians or for the editors, please put them in the chat, and we will get to them if we can. Enjoy. Thanks. Over to you, Miriam.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome our first guest speakers from Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago, Illinois. Colby Maddox is a resource center manager and teacher at Old Town School of Folk Music's Resource Center. He helped open the center in 1999 and helped develop its 17,000-piece lending library. In 2006, he used grant funding to establish the institution's archive of photographs, papers, artifacts, sound recordings, and video. And in 2022, Colby used funding from the Illinois State Library to hire 2 library associates and automate Old Town School's library holdings, expanding circulation to Old Town members and regional libraries participating in Find More Illinois. His recent side projects include raising 2 kids, editing the Old Town School of Folk Music's songbook, and playing around the greater Chicago area with his bluegrass band, Sunny Side Up. And with Colby is Laura Brethel, a library associate in the Resource Center at the Old Town School of Folk Music. With a background in rare books and manuscripts, she has performed archival and librarianship work in nonprofit, university, and museum settings. As a special collections librarian, Laura handles a wide variety of media and oversees cataloging practices to facilitate the unique user access needs present at the Old Town School. She actively participates in professional organizations and serves as the convener of the Rails Illinois Solo Librarian Network. She holds an MSLIS in Archives and Special Collections from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Welcome, Colby and Laura.
Well, thank you, Miriam, and thank you for that introduction. And Penguin, also thanking Penguin for having us here today. It's our pleasure. Yeah, Laura and I are librarians at the Resource Center at the Old Town School of Folk Music. The Resource Center consists of a lending library and an archive. We'll discuss both, but first we want to share with you a little bit about our organization. Let's go to the next slide. the Old Town School of Folk Music was founded in 1957 and is the oldest and largest community music school, or one of the oldest and largest. Up for debate probably, but we've been around since 1957. The school owns and operates 2 brick and mortar locations in Chicago, and programs a variety of fee-based applied music and dance classes, as well as a wide range of performances. The Old Town School also runs satellite programs on the west and south of the side of the city, providing free classes and concerts in communities that can't easily access our in-house programs or due to geographic or financial barriers. The school serves more than 100,000 students and concert goers annually. Next slide, please. A brief moment of history. That's kind of what I'm here for. Founding of the Old Town School was in, as I said, 1957, and it was founded as the kernel of a cultural engine for Chicago with a participatory twist. I have to say it was founded in Chicago, but and also was the founders were from all over, to be honest, and Chicago provided a unique ground for that. The founding took up where, with an audience that was created by the Gate of Horn, which was a club that was founded by Al Grossman, who was at one point Bob Dylan's manager. But in the 50s, Al's goal was to have a club that would be part of the hub of contemporary folk music venues around the country, and Chicago was going to be a big part of that. Was a big part of that, and the club brought people into the interior of the city at a time when white flight was in full bloom, and this was recognized by the founders. They were like, "Wow, look at that! People are coming downtown to see a show," and so the people who recognized that, the founders, were Win Strachey, who was a bass singer in the CSO as well as in churches. He had a full range of churches, had a full working life as a musician in the 30s and the 40s. His buddy Win Strachey's buddy Studs Terkel was also participatory in some of the same events, some of the same musical groups that Win was in the 30s and the 40s. One of them was the Chicago Repertory Theater, which was a labor theater, and the woman who ran basically the office for the Chicago Repertory Theater was named Gertrude Sulker. So the three of those founders were all intrinsically bound to Chicago's prehistory of being a musical hub, of being, labor conscious, class conscious, and also like watching the audience of Chicago to see what could be good for them. Dawn Greening was also one of the founders. Dawn was a housewife from Oak Park, self-proclaimed housewife from Oak Park, who was a folk music enthusiast, and she went to the Gate of Horn nightly and was buddies with Odetta, actually, the performer. And very, very quickly, like around 1956, 57, met Win, Gertrude, and Dawn met Win and Gertrude and Studs. And then a performer came through by the name of Frank Hamilton to the Gate of Horn. He was backing up Bob Gibson, and that solidified everything. Frank had a teaching method that he learned from Alan Lomax's sister, who was in California, which is where Frank was from. Bess Lomax Hawes was Frank's teacher, and she became an anthropology professor, but at the time she was just experimenting with bringing people together, having them learn music skills together, have a musical experience together, and get a chance to be exposed to music in a group setting. So Frank brought that teaching experience in, that codified it. All of those people I mentioned decided to sit down and form a school. They practiced in Dawn's living room in Oak Park, and in 1957 they opened up. Let's show the next slide. Sorry, let's go back for a minute. That is the opening night you see there, and that's Big Bill Brunzi playing and Frank demonstrating what he's doing to the crowd as a way of demonstrating how the lessons were going to take place at the Old Town School. In line to take lessons is Ella Jenkins, who is probably the foremost children's performer, who started her career as a student at the Old Town School, and Jeannie Clements, who was also a big folk music performer. And that's Gertrude there with the glasses. Let's go to the next slide. Sorry, thanks. I'm going back and forth. This is a good example of, there's another shot of Frank and Bill. Basically, a lot of performers came through, and these founders cashed in on their associations when Anne Gertrude had worked with Mahalia and Big Bill before, and they brought him in for the opening. Other performers like Doc Watson, we can go to the next slide too. Doc Watson is shown here, workshopping at the original location. There's Bill and Mahalia playing at the original location on North Avenue with the Weavers. And there's Studs in the 70s singing about drinking whiskey, probably. So it was an experience. There were classes, but there was a musical experience that brought in people from the outside. Other examples are Roger McGuinn was a student of the Byrds, was a student of Frank Hamilton's, and John Prine was a student of at the school, and also like we brought through people like Jose Feliciano, was a very well-known performer who would come through often. So at the time, we were kind of coming out of our skin after the first 10 years. So let's go to the next slide. And it was time to buy real estate. So we bought, I say we, I have to catch myself. It wasn't me. In 1968, I was 2, but the founders saw a need to expand. So they bought this building. In 1968, the school purchased property in Lincoln Park and spent 20 years developing its brand of participatory educational programs within the walls of Chicago's Aldine Building. That's what you see there, the Aldine Building. A converted bar and social hall at 909 West Armitage. By early 1970s, the original founders had retired, and Ray Tate, a professional musician with a degree from Northern Illinois University, was hired to run the school. Ray was in that previous slide that you saw. And he was ushered in by Studs, Wynn, and Dawn, and told, this is your job now. So for several years, he ran the school, and until 1987, around the 80s, mid 80s, Ray left, and a new administration came in and was renovated Armitage. The importance of the renovation is that, as you can see from the picture, it was kind of a small club-like atmosphere with like board and batten siding, kind of dusty on the inside. The Lincoln Park neighborhood in Chicago had not been fully gentrified. There was open IV drug use happening. It was sort of rough, right? So what we had was students who were mostly adventurous, culturally curious, white students who were coming again to the city center to enjoy an experience, a musical experience, similar to the Chicago Blues Club tourism that was happening at the time. So this went very well for 10 years between 1968 and between 1987, after this building was renovated, and then we existed within those walls for another 10 years. But then we move to the next slide. The school was asked to expand because we were doing noticeably better work. People could see us with the new renovation that we had done to Armitage. People like other communities of color were more welcome to come. We were having outreach programming to Latin communities, and we were more visible, and we were growing. So the school was asked to purchase the Hill Library in the Lincoln Square neighborhood for I think $1, and renovate it, and we extended our cultural engine up north. What you see here is we renovated the stacks of the library and created a concert hall out of it. That's the left, the center and right slide, and there's Mayor Daley leaving after his first inspection in his mayoral coach. So we still work very closely with the city. And sort of to sum it up, the Old Town School grew in this process. I can give you some figures. Between 97 and 99, which was right after we moved, there was about a 3 million jump from about 3 million a year to 6 million a year, and enrollment doubled to 24,000. The growth did not peak until 2002, when about 6,000 students were registered every week. or about 35,000 students a year. Coming up to the present time in 2023, the Old Town Schools annual audit, which we just had, confirms the 2023 audit confirms that we're at about $14 million a year in annual revenue. And we are a not-for-profit, so that money gets spent on creating the programs and on giving back to the community, and keeping the cultural, the outreach programs that we do running. Old Town School is fully engaged with the Lincoln Square neighborhood and programs an annual music for an annual festival in Lincoln Square, and it maintains a national profile with the Fretboard Summit, which is an international conference on instrument building of instrument builders. Our music during the 2000s, our concert program really grew into a mix of living folk music legends, roots rock pioneers, and evolving indie roots performers. World music artists are sourced for that concert series and curated both locally and internationally. So in present day, our current concertizing and events program includes notable artists and teachers who some of the noticeable artists that probably would ring a bell for you or be a mixture of Tom Paxton, Judy Collins, X, the Cowboy Junkies, The World's Tallest Man, The Magnetic Fields, then Omo Sangare, Salif Keita, the Celtic Fiddle Festival, Yomo Toro, and Del McCurry. So we've really kind of grown into a new purpose-built facility, which was built across the street from the Hill Library. And that was built in 2012. And we continue to expand our programming into that building. And that more than gives us the arm that we need to be open to the rest of the community here in Chicago and communities, and be welcoming to a variety of people, and sort of expand out from our original small kind of kernel of a club setting. Well, so that's me going on about the history, but let me allow Laura the floor, because Laura's got some extremely important library related information about what we've been, especially what has come to fruition for us, and even in this last couple of years as a library.
Thanks, Colby. Next slide, please. Awesome. So the Resource Center, or as we like to call it, the RC, was established in 1987, shortly after the second renovation of the school's Lincoln Park location, as Colby just talked about. But the founding of the RC really marked a shift for the school, and a concerted effort was made to maintain a research and a reference collection. And this, in its original form, consisted mostly of donated published materials centering on vernacular folk and roots music. And a majority of these items were curated by the school's teachers and local music enthusiasts. And some of these items we still have in circulation today. There's a giant stack of, a couple shelves of LP behind Paul Tyler there, the first manager of the Resource Center, and that's emulated right behind Colby. We have 4 rolling stacks of LPs right now. So next slide, please. And I want to talk a little bit about the archive that is under the umbrella of the Resource Center. As Colby said, and I just told you, the Resource Center also houses the school's archival collection. And the archive currently stands at a minimal processing level. Our focus is on preservation and digitization while maintaining efficient arrangement and description practices. There are approximately 32,000 items in the archive, and these consist of sound recordings, AV materials, photographs, ephemera, artist profiles, institutional papers, art, instruments, etc., all of the above. The list just goes on, it seems. But currently, a little over 50% of the archive has been digitized. And we shared with you today a personal favorite of mine, and I think of many people at the school. It's John Prine's registration card. Prine was and still is one of the most famous students to come out of the Old Town School. He began taking classes in 1963 at the age of 16. And what I think is most interesting about his registration card, on the it's flipped over, so the top is the back and, you know, the punches are the front. And you can see on the top right-hand corner in a circle, it tells us that in 1966, Prine was drafted by the US Army during the Vietnam War. Thankfully, he returned and started taking classes again in 1969. Next slide, please. So 2 other big highlights from our instrument collection are these 2 Martin guitars. On the left is the Martin 00028 owned by Big Bill Broonzy. And on the right is John Lennon's Martin guitar, the D28. So Big Bill, as Colby already said, he was the famous blues singer, songwriter, and guitarist. He used this Martin during his tours in England and Europe from 1951 to around 57. And you can hear the guitar's distinctive tone on a few of the sound recordings from that time, which is awesome. And this Martin, it held a lot of sentimental value for Broonzy. As you can see, it's kind of hard from this photo, but right up on the top, he personally embellished it with his own portrait, and he fixed it to the headstock under a little watch glass medallion. And it renders the guitar instantly recognizable. You've actually seen it already. He played it on the school's opening night. And then John Lennon's Martin was acquired by the school in 2011 when the school was approached by the state to preserve portions of Chicago's former Peace Museum. Lennon got this Martin in the mid-1960s and purportedly used it for composing and recording, and it can be seen, he can be seen playing it in his last live performances in the 1970s. A letter from Yoko Ono accompanies the guitar, and in the letter she states that she believes he, Lennon, composed the song Love on the guitar circa 1970. So today, these guitars are displayed during special events, and they're played intermittently by famous artists or by us, because as guitars, they're instruments who have to be played to breathe. And these objects were created to be used, and under careful observation, this is done to maintain the instrument's stable condition. Next slide, please. So now I want to share a little bit more about what the Resource Center looks like today. As Colby told you, in '97, the school expanded to the former Hild Library, and it was at this point that the RC was reestablished as a lending collection for teachers and staff. We currently have over 17,000 items in active circulation, including books and recordings and videos focused on vernacular music and dance forms. We engage our users in over a century of music traditions, and we are a special library. We're a niche library, and we're a loud library. We'll play your favorite records. We have 2 record players in the main library area, and we'll find you that exact lead sheet that you're looking for with the proper notation and arrangement just in time for class, because it's always, you know, that last minute run when teachers are coming in or students. And this unique user need is reflected in our classification systems and in our metadata. And now that our library is fully searchable on library software, that was funded by a recent grant for the state of Illinois in 2021. This meant we underwent a little over a year of intense barcoding and cataloging the entire lending collection. And in October of 22, so this time last year, we reopened the Resource Center, and institutional circulation has now extended to over 3,000 members at the school, as well as staff and faculty. Next slide, please. And this brings us to what the grant did. It propelled us into the circulating library that we are today. We're a part of the Rails library system, and we're a participating member of Find More Illinois, which is our interlibrary loan platform. We're engaging with a wider community, and this has really opened up the Resource Center in ways that the school has dreamed of for many years. And not surprisingly, LPs have been our most requested item through interlibrary loan. And I will say, just in the short year since opening or reopening, we've increased our outreach and inreach, and we've gained momentum, and we're able to start growing the Resource Center, and meaning that we get to ask ourselves the wonderful question, slide please, what's next? what are our focuses moving forward? What are we going to do? Well, we're going to enhance underrepresented areas of our circulating collection. As our collection was mostly donation-based, the collection lacks in certain genres, and now we have the opportunity to grow the library's holdings by making conscious acquisition choices and filling those gaps, hip hop being one of them. And another goal of ours is to elevate contemporary dialogues about music and dance. And we want to provide our users the ability to read the latest literature and dialogues in the arts, engaging with subjects such as race, gender, and the subversive nature of vernacular and roots music. And this is fundamental for understanding the roots of the songs that are played and taught at the school today. And lastly, I think this is on everybody's goal list, is increase community engagement through programming. So what does this mean? We're currently supporting other departments in their programming efforts. But in addition to this, we want to be producing our own events that serve to enrich the school's educational efforts. And this can be done in multiple ways, but we would like to align the Resource Center's interests with larger institutions and engage in academic discussions around music, around dance, and other vernacular traditions. And with that, next slide. We just want to say thank you, and we really appreciate being here. Please feel free to reach out to Colby and I if you have any questions or, yeah, just want to check out the Resource Center.
Thank you so much, Colby and Laura, for this presentation and giving us a virtual tour of the Resource Center. We do have a couple of comments and questions in the chat. Kelly Davenport mentions that it must be a little nerve-wracking to lend LPs through interlibrary loan.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I worked for 2 years to set up interlibrary loan, and in the 11th hour, the head of that department who I was to interface with started talking like he was very unsure, and so like we were ready for that. Yeah, they go out in very specialized mailers that are cardboard that take up all the available space. It's actually a very easily accomplished task to mail an LP very quickly through the mail. Ours don't go through the mail. Ours get handed to the driver, and the driver puts them in the front seat next to him, and they get really royal treatment. And as it stands, I haven't had to throw out a single mailer yet. We can reuse them. They come back almost in perfect shape. So there isn't, believe it or not, there is a certain halo around LPs. Thank goodness.
I would imagine that playing John Lennon's guitar would be also very nerve-wracking. Now, does anybody get to play that, or do you have to have like special?
It comes out in special events. We have a thing called the Fretboard Summit every year, and that's luthiers from all over the world who make guitars and mandolins and fretted instruments. And there's a lot of special events involving that where the guitar comes out and people do have an opportunity to play it. We are working on specialized programming that will happen every month and create opportunities for that. But that's always under supervised conditions. And our big ace in the hole is that Laura dealt with. What was it, Laura? What was your specialty? It was I don't want to say this wrong, but what was your archival specialty?
Oh, medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. Yeah.
Right. So like rings, medieval rings. And
Oh yeah.
manuscripts, jewelry. So like I basically. My blood pressure went way down when I learned that, because I was like, great, and she wants to be very involved. So like for the longest time it was me. I had to be there when the guitar went out, but we've now doubled our surface area. Yeah, it's a beautiful experience to play these guitars. I have, and it's a very nerve-wracking experience to send these guitars back to Martin in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, which I've done. That cost me about a week of my life. Not just in terms of like, it was just really nerve-wracking to send them. But
Yeah.
but they're both in really extremely good playing condition, thanks to Martin and some local people who helped with the setup. And they remain in great playing condition, and they get played, so they will survive.
I love that. I do. I love that they're still played. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
One of our last questions was, do you have like a definition of what you consider folk music?
Um,
This is our
True.
constant debate.
Yeah.
that's our constant debate. You want to stab at that one, Laura?
Well, yeah, I think the definition is always evolving. Folk music can be seen as vernacular music, it could be seen as roots music. And I think genres in and of themselves, coming from a library background where everything is classification, right? Um, it's hard. It's really hard to define what folk is. And I think that's where not just we get caught up, but also, sometimes the school does too. It's like, okay, this is in our name. How do we,
What does it mean?
what does it mean? What is it? We grapple with it because when we were established, it was the Folklore Center, right, Colby?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. It
And
was.
so and then, okay, there's Americana folk revival music, and that's kind of what was being played at the time. So that wraps up into it. But now folk is something different. And I think a lot of these conversations are crucial conversations and kind of why we want to elevate these different dialogues, because without having these discussions, we're not growing and we're not moving forward. And
Yeah. And when in 1957 the people that founded the school were pretty sure what they knew what folk meant, because it was a thing. It was a movement as far as they were concerned.
Yeah.
And we've been around long enough to be, and that was actually, they were not founded as, the founders were not like, as they were much more broad-minded than that name insinuates. I mean, they saw folk in a very broad definition, and as a market term, all of them pushed hard against the sort of marketing that folk got, and the sort of contemporary folk movement within is something that we still struggle with and reinterpret with. And our definitions of folk are very broad, and I think Laura nailed it with vernacular music is often the word that we use interchangeably. And it's important to remember that the folk music or Volk movement started in Germany as in Europe, actually, as a sort of reaction initially to the classical era. There was a return to the music of the people, and then we hold in high esteem the contemporary and traditional folk music, but that's not the end of the story by any means. And it's our job to integrate, I think, with that story with.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. That's interesting, and I'm sure it's ever evolving. And I'm just so happy that you exist as a place and as a community where people can reach out and celebrate this history and appreciate the music in real time. It's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
thank you so much for
Thank you.
having us.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be questions, and if anybody has questions, I know your email addresses are on the screen. So thank you. We will switch gears to our editors, where, Lunch and Learn is so fun. We got to see John Prine's registration card, and now we're going to hear about LL Cool J. So this is going to be our next part of the program, and we're thrilled that Vicki and Alec could be here today. I'm just going to give them a formal introduction before they start going through their slides. First, the book, LL Cool J Presents The Streets Win, 50 Years of Hip Hop Greatness. It chronicles the journey of this important musical genre through never before heard stories and photographs of hip hop from its inception through today. The 150 plus images included in this volume, from block party performances and street shots to sessions at recording studios, parties, and more, are accompanied by first-person recollections from hip hop's preeminent voices, including MCs, b-boys, graffiti artists, and DJs, who share how they fell in love with hip hop, broke into the business, their artistic and personal style inspirations, and their views on hip hop's culture and music. So this is going to be a really wonderful book to hear about from the two authors and editors of it. So Vicki Toback is an author, journalist, and curator. She is the author of critically acclaimed books, Contact High, A Visual History of Hip Hop, Ice Cold, A Hip Hop Jewelry History, and The Streets Win. Her work has appeared in Complex, Rolling Stone, the Library of Congress, and so many more places. She is a former producer and columnist for CBS, CNN, and Bloomberg News. Vicki got her start as a cultural editor for a paper magazine before going on to work at Payday Records, Empire Management, working with groups including Gang Starr, Jay-Z, and more. She has lectured widely about music photography and contemporary culture at American University, the Schomburg Center, the Kennedy Center, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit. And Alec Banks, who we found out earlier, has just always been a huge fan of this genre, is a journalist, author, and the editorial director of LL Cool J's Rock the Bells. He is the co-author of The Streets Win, 50 Years of Hip Hop Greatness, Compliments of Chicago Gang Style, Beyond the Streets, and contributed to Ice Cold, a hip hop jewelry history, and the Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap. His work has appeared in Esquire, British GQ, Complex, and Rolling Stone, including cover stories and profiles on figures such as Kobe Bryant, Maisie Williams, and Jaden Smith. So we are talking to two incredible experts in the field, and we can't wait to hear more about this incredible experience of putting this book together. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start because when we first started talking about this book, you know, the 50th anniversary of hip hop was about to be upon us, and there was a lot of books, documentaries, just anything and everything that you can think of hip hop related was coming down the pike. And also with that, there had just already been a lot of storytelling around hip hop. So, you know, when LL really wanted to kind of celebrate hip hop and celebrate the culture, I think that our idea for the book was there in spirit, but we were really challenged by what format it would take. And, you know, I started thinking, you know, here we are 50 years on, a lot of the greats of hip hop, you know, the LLs, the Nas's, the Dr. Dre's, they really disrupted the industry in a lot of ways. They were young kids who, you know, made it up as they went along. And just like Steve Jobs, you know, reinvented modern day technology, they are our great entrepreneurs. You know, people like Jay-Z, they've built not just the music and the culture, but they've also built businesses. And so I kind of got to wondering, you know, I've never heard about their low points or sort of what gave them their superhero powers, which was a prompt, you know, that Alec and I kind of came up with. And so, you know, we were kind of just going back and forth, like, what haven't we heard as people that love the culture, write about the culture, have covered it and consumed it for so long? What stories haven't been told? And we sort of landed on these first-person entrepreneurial stories that, you know, we would interview each artist and try to kind of draw out of them what were the things that in their lowest moments, you know, kept them going. What were the things where they just weren't so sure what this thing was going to become? What motivated them? What drove them? And who in their lives were those people, you know, that maybe gave them their superhero powers? So that's where we started out. And so, you know, the spirit of the book is to celebrate 50 years of hip hop greatness, just as, you know, the tagline says. But the stories are really, you know, special, you know, because it's really rare to get things that have never been heard. And with that, you know, we really wanted to make sure that the photographs as well were sort of, you know, more never before seen as much as possible, things that really capture the spirit of these kind of, you know, underdog stories that we were trying to tell.
I think that's good. I mean, you succinctly said it. Like, I think Vicky and I have heard the same anecdotes probably for the last 20 years, and they're great stories, and people will tell you them as if they're brand new. I think the way I approached it was, you know, like Vicky mentioned, origin stories. Like, we know Peter Parker got bit by the radioactive spider and became Spider-Man, and we know that Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered. But we tend to focus on their superhero exploits saving the world versus what was it like when they were just sort of regular people. So that origin story is sort of, yes, what we tried to bring out of the subjects, which many times was challenging, but also fun as fans of the genre to hear stuff that, you know, we haven't heard a million times before.
Yeah, so this was, you know, a slide what you're looking at. This is LL Cool J early on in his career, doing a photo shoot in Harlem, which was interesting because, you know, he's Guy Noah from Queens and very much known for being, you know, Queens centric. But, you know, this photo and also this block has changed so much over time, just as hip hop has. And, you know, so this is the opening of his foreword to the book, which is called Dreams Don't Have Deadlines, which, you know, really kind of kicks off what kind of drove him. He talks about, you know, being in his grandmother's basement and his grandmother really, you know, giving him, instilling in him something that wanted him to be great. So he sort of writes about that, you know, a little bit in his foreword and inside the book. And he really, you know, I think he really didn't want to overshadow the rest of the artists in the book. I think that was also something really important, you know, because he is such a big superstar and such a presence, I guess, in, you know, in the music. And so whenever you have LL Cool J Presents, you know, on the cover of a book, people are gonna want and expect and know that it's going to be a lot of LL Cool J, but he was actually very humble and intentional in making sure that everyone in the book got their shine as a complete culture. So, so, you know, that's why we really started at the very beginning. You know, the book is chronological and we wanted to kind of slow down, especially those kind of beginning moments, because a lot of times when the story of hip hop is told, you hear, you know, Kool Herc and his sister Cindy threw a party in the Bronx and, you know, fast forward and here we are. But there's so many kind of smaller moments that you don't hear about kind of in mainstream books or coverage. The story of, you know, Coke La Rock, who was also at that party, who first started talking on the mic, you know, and he is kind of credited with, you know, being the first MC, whereas Herc was sort of credited as being the first kind of party DJ. So, you know, this photo here, this is, you see Herc in the background in the sunglasses, but this is really a party. It's at Bronx River Center. So next slide. We do then follow up and go into the story of Herc and Cindy Campbell, and talking about, you know, not just that party that they threw, which, you know, for those who don't know, you know, that August 11th date is the date that, you know, 50 people say, like, what is the date associated with 50 years of hip hop? That's the date. So the date that Kool Herc and Cindy threw this party in the rec room of their building in the Bronx. So we have them kind of talk about that here, but also talk about, you know, how they were immigrants from Jamaica and how sound system culture in Jamaica and like DJing in Jamaica, he kind of brought that along with him. You see there in that photo in the car, those are two giant speakers in the back seat of the convertible car. And, you know, he would kind of drive around the Bronx just the way in Jamaica, sound systems were kind of brought out in public and set up with these big speakers and such. So, you know, kind of going a few layers deeper than just, hey, there was this party. Next slide. And this is just a continuation. We also, you know, wanted to make sure that we included a lot of ephemera. So, you know, we tracked down the original flyers for that party, which, you know, were written on index cards and passed out before, you know, internet and phone calls became the way for party invites. A lot of kind of personal Polaroids that we had there, again, like just trying to, pull out things that people may not have seen before. And then next slide. And then Alec, I'll kick it over to you to kind of talk about, because I mentioned, Coke La Rock, but talk about why we wanted to include folks like him that are not household names.
Yeah, I
To
think
balance out the big names as well.
the main point of in my opinion is that a lot of times in hip hop, success has been determined by chart position or financial gain, right? And it's like, how many gold records did you sell? How many platinum albums? Do you have a nice watch? Especially in this early part of this book, and what LL Cool J has mentioned is that no one thought it was going to last 50 years. Maybe it was going to last a year, and it was going to go the way of disco or something to that effect. I think in the book we say that something that some people thought it was going to have it's the shelf life of a carton of milk, and so we wanted to make sure that people were represented based on impact. And so how would we not include someone who's widely recognized as the first MC in the book, right? Some people might want to skip that because it's not the sexiest thing to focus on, but like Coke La Rock is the first MC, so I think that's important, and we wanted to give people a chance to tell their stories as they remember it, because Herc has been reduced to sort of a person. It's great to be credited as the godfather or the inventor of hip hop, but then that's it. So we wanted to make sure that, and then of course Cindy, as the person who had the idea for the party, to make sure that she was properly represented and not just seen as the B-side in the story. And for anybody who's going to get Beyonce tickets now, however much they cost, that party I think cost 50 cents to get into, and you could have a hot dog for maybe a quarter or $1 or something. So things have changed, the business has changed, but in its infancy, these parties were kind of escapism too, from a reality of the Bronx being landlords burning down buildings and getting rent money and sort of gentrification. So again, like Coke La Rock is in here because he means something. He might not have got his financial due, but he's important. So we can go to the next slide.
I just want to interject. I just saw in the chat that Ralph McDaniels, the great Ralph McDaniels, is in our chat, which of course, because of the Queen's Library, I was surprised because I just wasn't expecting it, but of course, because of your role in the Queen's Library. So the great Ralph McDaniels, founder of Video Music Box, who's also in the book, is also here with us today. So hi, Ralph, and thank you.
I mean, Nas, who just celebrated his 50th birthday, which is, quite apropos, because it's hard to tell the story of hip hop without Nas. I believe, Ricky, this is an Atsuko Tanaka photo, which just feels like a fly on the wall. He's probably credited with creating arguably the greatest hip hop album of all time. I mean, we can get into that debate, but Illmatic. But I think that we didn't ask him what was it like to create Illmatic. So in this text he talks about his grandparents coming from the South and the challenges of growing up in the Queensbridge projects, which ultimately lays the groundwork of what goes into the autobiographical nature of probably the greatest debut album and maybe the greatest hip hop album of all time. But Vicky had a great eye for finding photos that I had never seen before. So as a fan, I'm drawn to just how young he is, and does he know he's going to become one of the greatest MCs of all time? Maybe, but in the moment, maybe not. So
I I thought, yeah, like, I mean, this photograph was taken by a Japanese photographer who happened to be living in New York in the 90s. She's since moved back, but has an amazing archive. I was like, we have to use this photo because, like, look at that couch that he's sitting on. It's like a brown velour couch. It's kind of reminded me of like couches in like hip hop studios, the like black leather couch that's like so common, where a lot of just kind of thinking and politicking happens. And his gaze, like the way he's looking out, looks like he's in deep thought, and I thought that too was in spirit of the book. Someone said to me later that he looks like he's playing a video game, which kind of, I'm like, no, I don't want that. I want to pretend like he's deep in thought. So I don't know, Ralph, you or LL need to ask Nas what he was doing in this photo, so we can finally know for certain.
And then, I mean, it's hard again. Dr. Dre was very hands-on with his essay, which is not surprising if you know how meticulous he is supposedly in the studio. And he wanted to curate his essay like he was getting the drums right on a song, like he was really in the weeds. Some people were more in the weeds than others, and I would say Dr. Dre, a KRS-One, they spent a lot of time crafting what they wanted to say to the world in the 50th year. I think the interesting thing that I would draw from this is Dr. Dre thought about quitting. He's on the 101 Expressway in Los Angeles, probably stuck in traffic. He was having problems with Eazy-E and Jerry Heller and all of that sort of noise around NWA. And he was going to give it up. And then he got creatively inspired. And what did that lead to? The Chronic, which is just, again, like, I'm fascinated by these butterfly effects of like, what if people quit? What happens? Like, if Dr. Dre doesn't make the Chronic, the world is probably not the same. I mean, I don't mean to be grandiose, but things probably don't play out like they do. So to learn about that from Dre's essay was kind of a highlight for me as a music fan. Vicky, if you want to talk about the photo, yeah.
Yeah, just again, the previous photo was taken by Jonathan Mannion, and as Ralph McDaniels' photo in the book also was taken by Jonathan Mannion. But adding photos like this, which is the following spread after his Dr. Dre's essay, I think it just also takes you visually deeper into those moments of working through things, of making making your album or creating your work. And, it's not all pretty. Some of it's real messy and real frustrating. And I feel like Dre, looking really deep in thought here, Snoop looking like he's focused / real mad at something, and the guy behind him kind of laughing at something. So this, again, the photography really had to match the spirit of what we were trying to get out of these butterfly effects. And I'll just okay, oh, this was our last slide, so it's just a good moment for me to chime in here. Like, one thing I'll say with this book, and having done 2 other hip hop books as well, we're at this moment, especially for hip hop titles, where access and participation is really challenging. I came up at a time when, like, when in hip hop, where getting interviews with people or access to people was pretty easy. You would it was just pretty easy in early days. But nowadays, I don't know that we could have done half the book, if it weren't for LL Cool J texting Dr. Dre, texting Nas, which is like a very just, run and gun approach, but it really, I was like, wow, these kinds of books or these kinds of stories are just really, really challenging to make. That's why, and I'm extra proud of this book, doing it with, with Alec and LL, like this was really challenging, and I don't think could have gotten done with many other teams.
I agree. It was really hard. Any book is hard, but trying to wrangle 100 different MCs, b-boys, b-girls, graffiti artists. But we intentionally, I think we made our homework very hard because we wanted to make a book that we wanted to enjoy. And like, there was something thrilling every day of like LL Cool J texting me, and it's a Word document from Dr. Dre, and I'm just like, what is my job right now? Like I'm getting oh, Dr. Dre has Microsoft Word. Okay, like this, I was a fan. So again,
I love that. That actually is very cool. You can tell that you're fans because there's so much heart and soul and like detail. This is amazing. This is amazing. It really is. That was an amazing presentation. We'll take one question before we're going to ask you one question before we wrap up, but we can't thank you enough for being here. This is such a wonderful celebration of this genre. We're so excited about it. And I also will say that what is it called? The book you did, I think both of you worked on, the Ice Cold book, the hip hop jewelry. I've worked in publishing my whole life. I got that for my brother for his birthday last year. It is like his favorite thing he's ever received in his entire life.
Oh, amazing.
So I had to say that since I'm talking to you guys. But Miriam said a comment for editors. Your book shines a light on women's contributions in hip hop history as well. For example, Roxanne Shanti writes, being a woman who could battle, rap, and being so young, I grew to understand that being a woman in hip hop could be very difficult at times. Perhaps you could just speak to that as your final little tidbit of info for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really important for us, of course, to, include women and be, true to the story. And there's no denying, Roxanne Shante or even Sha Rock, who we profiled, even a little earlier than Roxanne. We made sure, that women were well represented in the book and got to tell their own stories. And, also just told deeper stories than just, it was challenging to be a woman because of course, that is a well-trodden story, but important. But, we also wanted to push even further. Like, Roxanne Shante says, when I walked into a room, I thought I was the best, not the best female MC, but the best MC, period. So to kind of really get into how she felt as a woman and those kinds of stories, and then all the way down to Trina, who's a more comes much later than both Roxanne Shante and Sha Rock, but putting something like Trina on there, who really was kind of a predecessor to like the Cardi B's and the Megans and the, all the contemporary women, but also maybe not as well known. So it was kind of important for us to shine a light on all of that. Of course, with page count limits and everything, like we were both, wanting to have more artists, but I think we got a really good mix and representation of all of it.
That's really great. And we hope that the libraries will embrace this book and be able to tell their patrons how much love and appreciation went into the making of it. And we can't thank you enough for being here today. We're fans of the book and we will keep promoting.
Yeah.
And we've been
My mom was a librarian, so I like to say that as much as I can. Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, thank you for being here today, and thank you to all of you for joining us. We will, like we said, we send out the archive with all this information, and we do have a slide up for further reading titles, for music titles. There's so many great ones. It's been a great year for music books, and we hope that you will reach out to library@penguinrandomhouse.com if you have any questions about today's episode. And we'll start the new year off with the new episodes of Lunch and Learn. And Miriam, do you have anything you want to add before we close out?
No, thank you so much to our special guests, and thank you, audience, for supporting our authors and books.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.